Again, my view is inflation, or kind of the house view is inflation is going to be persistently higher. And that can happen in the very short term, like literally weeks. And I think the structural forces have changed.
Hello, investing buffs and financial enthusiasts. Welcome to our channel, your source for top insights from the world's financial titans. We're here with fresh knowledge to energize your financial adventure. Today, we have a special treat for you. A rare interview with the legendary Bill Ackman. We dig deep into billionaire investor Bill Ackman's thoughts. He brings attention to inflation, but don't panic. In this video, we'll reveal that there's more to the tale. Stay tuned to learn Ackman's plan to not only safeguard your money, but also earn significant profits despite inflation. Let's get started. Here's what you've been waiting for. What Ackman suggests for wealth building during inflation. These strategies are for everyone, pros and beginners. Use them as a roadmap, not just to weather the inflation storm, but thrive in inflationary times.
Are you still figuring that rates at the long end, the 30-year, for example, or however on the long end, are still going to go higher?
Yes. I think there's, even in the relative short term, there are a number of reasons why rates can move a lot. Among them, right, we have a government shutdown. We're going into what looks like a highly probable government shutdown. We're going to have a data shutdown, right? All these little government agencies that put out data that the Federal Reserve relies on to decide whether to, adjust interest rates, then they're going to lose access to that data. So we're going to have this sort of like kind of dark period. We have probably the worst technical environment in our lifetimes for supply of bonds versus buyer bonds, right? We have China selling. We have Russia, to the extent they own any U.S. securities and more, selling. We have Saudi Arabia selling. And we have an economy that is still strong and inflation, 3.5%, 4%, and persistent. But, our view is basically you're not being paid enough to enter into a 30-year contract with the U.S. government at a fixed price. 4.7 or wherever it is now. It doesn't make sense in a world where we think structural inflation is north of 3% for the very long term. We went through this very unusual period with extremely low interest rates, where everything just got cheaper. And since the financial crisis, the effort of the Federal Reserve was to make sure we didn't have deflation. The aspirational goal is to get to 2% inflation. And then the pandemic and, trillions of fiscal stimulus, the psychological stimulus of being free to roam after being locked up, all of these factors coming at once kind of lit inflation. And we still have this massive deficit spending. We still have infrastructure spending. The government's selling literally hundreds of billions of dollars of securities, bills, and at some point they're going to have to sell more and more of the longer instruments. And if you look at the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, it's an imprudent balance sheet. If you think about the United States, right, if this were like a business, you wouldn't have so much short-term, you wouldn't have, a third or more of your debt repricing within the next year, so it's not been managed. I think actually Steve Mnuchin did a good job as Treasury Secretary. The one thing he missed is he should have issued a lot of 30-year, 50-year, 100-year paper at crazy low interest rates, and that's going to be a burden.
Hearing a lot from investors these days. Ken Griffin was on our network within the last week or so. I just had a conversation with Rick Reeder of BlackRock. Those who are talking about the possibility of much higher real rates for much longer than people think, for the very reasons that you're talking about. The issuance is so massive, and where are the buyers going to come from? And the result of that is going to be higher real yields.
I don't know about much higher real rates. I think again, my view is inflation, or kind of the house view is inflation is going to be persistently higher.
Well, you are the house.
I guess I control the door on the way in and out, I guess. But, our view is really that we're in a different world. And, the world sort of changes gradually. And you have a generation of people who are used to rates, 4 sounding like a high interest rate. And it's, on a historical basis, it's an extremely low rate of interest. So I would not be shocked to see, 30-year rates well into the, through the 5 barrier. And you could see the 10-year approach 5.
Jamie Dimon.
And that can happen in the very short term, like literally weeks. We've
10
seen
year.
a huge move in the last number of weeks. And I think a lot of that is investors kind of rethinking. What's interesting about the 30-year Treasury is people reflexively buy it whenever they because they've made money doing it in advance of a recession. But it's really not an instrument you should use to speculate on the short-term economy. It's a fixed price contract with the U.S. government for 30 years and reflects really structural forces. And I think the structural forces have changed.
The warning given by billionaire investor Bill Ackman about the future of inflation sure grabbed attention. But is the situation as grim as it seems? There's no need for worry. We're going to analyze Ackman's viewpoints and reveal a technique that could spin things to your benefit. Ackman recently gave a rare, long interview where he discussed many things. His viewpoints on inflation were the highlight. Keep reading to understand his economic views, why inflation stays high, and how to protect your money from its effects. Understanding the inflation landscape. Before we dig into Ackman's pro tips, let's get a handle on our challenge. Inflation. Inflation is the silent wealth killer at the value of your hard-earned money. But don't worry, Ackman unravels the basics, giving you a clear understanding with the knowledge of how to fight with this economic beast. Recently, inflation rates have climbed up, reminding us of the early 80s. People used to worry about low inflation or even deflation. But now, things are different. The Federal Reserve targeted a stable 2% inflation, but it's tough. What's causing these price increases? In the 2020s, people got more money due to economic stimuli. At the same time, supply chain issues caused some goods to be scarce, so prices rose. Ackman thinks this isn't just for now, but might last longer. The forces behind inflation. Ackman views the situation from a broader perspective. He takes into account global political and economic changes. You've got higher costs of producing goods abroad, people asking for better pay, and an enhanced focus on eco-friendly energy, contributing to economic changes. Also, the fact that gas prices are skyrocketing does make you think, will paying more for everything become usual? The Federal Reserve tries to control inflation by changing interest rates. However, Ackman thinks these changes might stay for good. Bill Ackman's investment portfolio. Let's delve into Ackman's way of investing. Even though he manages a fund worth billions, he only invests in 7 companies. From Alphabet to Hilton, his choices show he's selective. But what's special about these companies? The companies Ackman chooses have 2 main traits that help them resist inflation, and in some cases, benefit from it. The first trait is pricing power, the power to increase prices without scaring customers away. Ackman's insights for investors. Ackman isn't bothered by inflation. He trusts we can adjust to this economic change. Let's hear it from the man himself.
You must be negative to the equity market. I mean, how could you have a positive view of stocks if you think that that's the outcome for bonds, yields?
Because if you own high quality, the key is owning businesses that have pricing power. Businesses that can do well in a world of, and by the way, many businesses can do well in a world of 3% inflation. The key is it's hard to manage a business in a world where inflation is volatile, or inflation is 8%, or the kind of crazy numbers. But many businesses can do very well in a world of 3% inflation. And the kind of companies we own, they're very much like royalties. So we own Universal Music, which is a royalty on listening to music. If there's music playing out there, Universal's getting a fraction of a penny for every song that's being streamed. Google's a royalty, if you will, on people advertising, on the web, right, or on YouTube. Restaurant Brands is a royalty on people eating at Burger King or any of their various concepts. Hilton is a royalty on people staying in hotels and eating and drinking and going to events. The beauty of these kinds of businesses is, actually inflation is ultimately their friend, right? As long as they can keep their costs, as long as their costs don't inflate as quickly as their revenues. And I think the nature of those, so I feel comfortable owning those kinds of businesses, even if inflation remains high. And also, again, historically, if you think about, what is the value of a business? It's the present value of the cash you can take out of it over its life, discounted back at an appropriate interest rate. We were not discounting businesses back using 2% as an appropriate rate of interest. So we've historically, our discount rate we've used, just rough measure is more like 10%, 9%, numbers which discount the uncertainty inherent of investing in equities.
Yes, the stock market could wobble due to higher interest rates, but Ackman stands firm. He targets companies that work as royalties, gaining as they expand in their sectors. Will his foresight be accurate? We have to wait and see. All right, everyone. We've just shared Bill Ackman's strategy worth billions. Will his wisdom endure? We want your thoughts. Leave them below. Make sure to follow for weekly tips on investing. Enjoy your journey in investing, and we'll meet again in the upcoming video.